Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is bleed. Let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb bleed can mean to lose blood from one's body. And generally that can be because of some type of injury or illness. Right? Might be a cut or something else that is causing blood to leave someone's body. Related to that is the second definition, which is to remove blood on purpose from an animal carcass. So sometimes people might do this as they are preparing an animal to be slaughtered so that the meat can be taken and processed and eventually consumed. A third way to use the verb bleed is a bit more informal. It says here to drain someone of money or a particular resource. Now, this is a verb I've, again, informally heard people use, especially when they talk about their children, right? They might go, oh my goodness, all my kids' activities, they're bleeding me. Meaning, I have to keep spending more and more money for this and for that. A fourth way you might hear bleed used can mean to allow either a fluid or a gas to escape from a closed system through some type of valve or other mechanism. So as I looked into examples of this, I saw many references related to automotive repair, so car repairs. If this is a field you're interested in or maybe you work in, then you might encounter this verb more. Now, I don't do any type of car repair, so this isn't a particular definition. I would use that frequently, but others do. Now, a fifth way you might hear bleed used can mean for a color or dye to seep out and to seep into an adjacent area or color. So with this fifth definition, it might help to think about the process of washing your clothes. Right? Sometimes you have to be careful about mixing certain colors at certain temperatures. I know sometimes if you wash a red article of clothing in really hot or warm water and you wash it with something white, the shirt may bleed. That sort of red color can turn the white item pink. For now, you should know that bleed is an irregular verb. To make the progressive form of the verb, all you're going to do is add ing, and that forms bleeding. The past tense and participle form of this verb requires a spelling change. So our past tense and participle forms will be spelled B-L-E-D, and we're going to change our pronunciation to a short E vowel sound. So it should sound like this: bled, bled. Okay. Now, I know we've already discussed 5 different ways to use the verb bleed, but there are actually a number of phrasal verbs as well. So we're going to focus our practice and some additional discussion on these phrasal verbs. The first phrasal verb you might encounter is to bleed for. This can have a couple different meanings. One might be that one person is sort of feeling or really deeply empathizing with another person's emotional pain. Okay? Let's take a look at an example sentence. They bleed for anyone who's had to flee their home because of persecution. So here, what we're using the simple present verb tense to describe someone's maybe their habit or a fact here. Kind of we're getting into some feelings here, and I know this is something I hear from many teachers who work with adult learners, particularly when they have refugees in their classes, and those students share stories about what they have experienced, what their families have experienced, and for many times how long they've had these experiences. So I know many teachers who would say, oh my goodness, having heard so many stories, I understand, and I feel kind of a deep sense of empathy and possibly sympathy too with anyone who's had that type of experience. A second way you can use bleed for can mean to support something so passionately that you're willing to accept either some pain or some suffering because of that support. Let's take a look at an example of that. Would you bleed for this cause? Right? So this is a hypothetical question, but one that many people ask. I know that in our news right now, there are many stories about protests and violence that has occurred at protests. This is a question many people ask, right? Are you willing to support this? So much so, you might suffer. Another phrasal verb that you might encounter is to bleed off. An example, or the meaning, I should say, first of this is to take off a part or all of the fluid. This goes, I think, back to our fourth definition a few minutes ago. So you're doing it from a tank or a line, and again, using some kind of mechanism to control that release. So an example of this. You'll bleed off the air while changing the brake fluid. This is an example of the simple future using will. And again, I was looking for different examples, and I saw many examples as people described doing oil changes, brake fluid changes, other sort of minor automotive repairs or improvements. So here we're saying we're going to take out, right, some of the air as we go through this process. Now, let's talk about one more phrasal verb you might encounter. That is to bleed out. This phrasal verb can have a number of different meanings. We're going to talk about 4 of them. The first way you might encounter it, this is not a great thing here, but the meaning is to die from the loss of blood. So someone is so severely injured that too much blood escapes or leaves their body. Their heart is no longer able to pump it, and they're no longer able to live. An example of this: we need medical help now, or he's going to bleed out. This is another simple future sentence. You might hear somebody sort of yelling, screaming this in a type of emergency, right? This is extremely serious. Whatever this person is undergoing, they're losing a lot of blood from their body. A second way to use bleed out goes back to the second definition of our verb. So that's, again, draining either some or all of the blood of an animal. An example of this: first, they'll bleed out the pig before the butchering begins. Here's another simple future sentence with will, kind of describing the process for how meat is going to be produced from this animal. A third way to use bleed out can mean to drain something of all or nearly all of some substance. So again, kind of similar to that fourth definition. Example of this: he bleeds out his radiators every fall so that the hot water circulates better. Okay. So again, we're kind of talking about a process. A radiator is used to heat some homes, and again, this is not really my area of expertise, so I'm not making a recommendation to you as to how to do this, but many people will release or drain what's in the system in order to get things to work better going forward. A fourth way to use bleed out can mean to lose a large amount of some resource very quickly. An example of this might be: our state has been bleeding out college graduates for the past 10 years. Here's a present perfect progressive sentence describing an action that started in the past, continues into the present, and may continue into the future. So many people think of highly educated people as a great resource, right, to have in our communities. They're great for the workforce. They generally earn nice incomes. They're able to pay taxes, right? Here, this sentence is saying we're losing this resource. They're moving to other places and not choosing to stay. This is an issue where I live and in many smaller United States regions or areas. Now, let's spend a little bit of time reviewing words that are related to our verb bleed. And the first word we're going to talk about is just the noun form of this word. The noun form, bleed, has the exact same pronunciation and the exact same spelling. When we use this word as a noun, it can have a couple different meanings. We're going to talk about 3 of them. So the first way it gets used is to refer to an instance of bleeding, so of blood escaping one's body. So an example of this. Doctors have discovered a brain bleed, right? So there is bleeding in this person's brain. A second way to use the noun bleed can mean the escape of fluid or gas from some type of closed system, generally through a valve. So, an example of this, has the air bleed been completed? Okay, so again, we're talking about kind of removing air from some particular system, might be in a car or some other type of mechanical system. And then a third way to use the noun bleed is to talk about that action or process of some dye or ink or color seeping, moving into an adjacent area or next to or into another color. An example of this. Cold water can prevent bleeds when doing laundry. Okay. Now, you've probably been waiting for this next word, so many times as you think of the verb bleed, many people will also think of the noun blood. So this can have a couple different meanings as well. We'll talk about 2 of them. So the noun blood is most commonly used to talk about the red liquid that is inside all of our bodies. It's circulating, moving around the arteries and the veins within our bodies. So an example of how you might hear this used. Do you ever donate blood? Right? It's a common practice here and very much needed to help people who are hospitalized, who go through surgery, right? So many people give blood. I've tried it. I'm a little person that sometimes has some challenges with it, but it is a worthwhile activity if you are able to do so. Now, a second way you might hear the noun blood used is really more a reference to violence that results in people being injured or killed. And so you might hear that word bloodshed, meaning people are bleeding and sometimes unfortunately dying. So an example of this might be, the news has been full of blood and anger, right? So this would really be another way to say there's a lot of violence in the news. Another related word you might encounter is bleeding heart. This word can be used both as a noun or an adjective. When we use it in either of these forms, we're generally describing a person who is considered to be so soft-hearted. Some would say even dangerously soft-hearted or overly sympathetic. You might think of this as like being too sympathetic, too understanding, right? Kind of going above and beyond. So an example of this might be, they have been called bleeding heart liberals due to their support of basic income programs. So there are different programs here in the United States and in many other countries where people are given a certain set income each month. It's not related or connected to work. It's just kind of an experiment right now as to how does that affect people? Does it help people who are in poverty? What kind of choices do they make? What changes occur because of this? So I have seen many people supporting these programs and the research that comes with them, but others are extremely critical of them and think, those who like it. Oh, they're too soft-hearted. People need to work more. They might have those kind of strong ideas. One last idiom or phrase for us to talk to, and it goes back to our earlier definition. I think that slang we were talking about, depleting or taking up all of a resource. So you might hear someone use the phrase to bleed someone or to bleed something dry. That generally means we are taking up or we are using up all of a particular resource. An example of this, I've heard people say things like, oh my goodness, these new taxes are bleeding us dry. So here, someone is suggesting it's taking all of my money. It's using up all of my money. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.